My name is Ann Elliott, and I'm from homeschoolingtorah.com, and I'm on the phone tonight with Heidi Cooper, and she is from torahfamilyliving.com. And I have been so excited to move into the same state as Heidi. We're both in Michigan now, but we're far enough apart that we haven't actually met in person, but I just feel like I'm our next-door neighbor. And yet I've been able to follow her for quite a few years online, and I've learned so much from how she very simply homeschools her kids and incorporates the Torah, nature study and copywork and journaling, and these are some of the things that I have learned from her, and I wanted her to share with you tonight a little bit about some of her very easy methods, but they're not easy. You have to be really intentional about it. At least that's from my perspective. So, okay, Heidi, can you introduce yourself and just tell about how old your kids are and a little bit about your family?
Sure. Again, my name is Heidi, and I've been married for 16 years now. We have 7 children, and we live down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere on a farm with a lot of animals. We have our oldest daughter is 14, and our youngest son is 2, and they're all boom, 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 right in the middle between them. And, yeah, my oldest daughter, she just started high school this year. We've been actually at school for about a month now, because I told him, you don't get your summers off anymore. We got to get to work. And then my youngest, of course, is pretty much, he still nurses and, crawls around and gets into everything. So it's a pretty busy house. But I do depend quite heavily on things like sending them outside and, go explore. So, yeah, that's where we're coming from. Also, I can mention we've been keeping this on this Torah journey, I like to call it, for 9 years now. So still learning, still realizing how much we have to learn. So, yeah, that's where we are coming from.
Well, longer than we have been, so that must explain why, or maybe just about the same time, but that explains why I've been learning from you. I first found you, Heidi, when you were writing for a website that had activities of things you could teach your kids about a variety of school subjects, but had one for every Torah portion. And so it had ideas for math and science and history, and they were really simple, and it got my brain going, to say the least. I saw on your website that you say you use an approach that's somewhere between Charlotte Mason and Robinson curriculum. Now, I know what Robinson curriculum is, but could you kind of tell our listeners a little bit about what you do every day?
Sure. I was homeschooled in high school, and then I'm homeschooling my kids, and I have a very eclectic approach, you could call it. I've been influenced in a lot of directions, and I also have some health problems, you could say. I have a lot of joint problems, so I tend to, in a lot of ways, be a little more hands-off. I expect a lot of my kids as far as independent learning, so you'll see that in how I do things. This year, I think we have settled into a very nice approach. I have all of the kids' schoolwork for the whole first semester all printed off and ready to go, and each week they get what they are doing for that week in a 3-ring binder, and they're expected to have that work done by the end of the week. So you can see I do expect quite a bit of self-motivation from them. But since I don't necessarily spend a lot of time sitting at a table, particularly with the older kids, I have a lot of discussions with them, and I have a lot of written feedback from them, which I know we'll be talking about in a little while, so that I know where they're coming from and that they are getting the deeper principles out of their schoolwork. For example, my kids each have a history book. It may be a textbook. It may be more of a original source document or stories from history. I use a variety of materials, but then we either discuss it and say, okay, now how does that compare to what we see in Torah? Were they doing things right? Were they completely off base? Were they punished because of what they did? We either discuss it, compare it, or we are they're actually writing it down for me, and then we're talking about it. That's how I get the feedback from them. But I find, and I think maybe because we've been at this for a while, it's very natural for me that I'm just automatically asking them questions. How does that compare to Torah? The way you just treated your brother, was that Torah? And it's very natural. It just comes up in conversation all the time. I admit, I am not the most faithful at sitting down and reading the Bible with my kids every single day. I am trying so hard, but I fail. I totally fail.
Well, you mentioned you have health problems, and you have a 2-year-old, and who's still nursing.
And it's like, where did the day go, you know? But I do it as much as I possibly can, and we also are very faithful on Shabbat to be teaching them. But the point is, every day it's just coming up in conversation, and we're comparing our schoolwork, what we're learning in school, to Torah, even if we're not always.
Exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
If I compare that method you just said, that is exactly what the Torah says to do. With, I think when I first found you, that's what made all the bells go off in my head, because I thought that's simple, and I've had a lot of health problems and everything. I can do that. It's not, you know, something that. The hardest part for me, I think, when I was first coming to Torah, and I know a lot of people will feel this way, is that I didn't have a clue what the Torah said. And I was raised in a Christian home, and I have a really good understanding of the New Testament, but some of those first few years of the Torah, I said, I've never heard of that guy before. You know?
In fact, when we first actually left the church, and all of a sudden realized we are responsible for our children's spiritual education, literally, I think a year went by. We shooed the kids outside every Shabbat, and we studied it, my husband and I. And then, okay, now we feel like we're ready to actually teach them. But we took time to learn it ourselves as adults, because, like you just said, I don't remember ever reading that in there. Where did that come from? Because we weren't really taught it before. So, yeah, I think parents need to, particularly when they're coming out, they need to take time and learn it for themselves first. And then, okay, now start teaching your children. And give yourself that time. It's okay, you know?
Wow. Well, let's say you have, I'm going to guess here, you probably have, you've got a high schooler, you've got probably 2 that aren't really in school yet, maybe 3.
I have a kindergarten and first grader that are kind of working together, and I have a 3rd grader. She has been very slow at reading, so I pretty much hold her hand on a lot of things still. Sure. And then my oldest 3 are in 5th, 7th, and 9th grade, and they pretty much do all of their work independently and check in with me on what they're doing. Right. And then the 2-year-old, of course, just whatever, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you, I read on your site that you do a lot of journaling and notebooking and creative things. Can you tell me about that, and how does that work with all of those different age groups?
It actually works very well. The older kids like I said before, they are expected to give me some written feedback on what they're learning. They don't necessarily always give me a lot. You know, my oldest daughter has declared, Mom, you're the author, I am not, you know.
I've heard that too.
So I can, get maybe a paragraph out of her. She's not real big into it, but you get her talking and she will just talk your ear off. So I do tailor it, how I get their feedback, I do tailor it to the child. For example, she talks nonstop, so I'm more than happy to tell me how you feel about what you read in your science. Does that match up, or are you having problems with it? And she is really developing her own opinions now and her own belief structure, and she has some very strong beliefs about things. And yes, it lines up with Torah because she's been taught faithfully, but it's becoming her own, which is really exciting. Mm-hmm. I also use drawing quite heavily, which might surprise some people. How can you get much feedback from them drawing a picture, right? But it's been incredibly helpful, particularly with a daughter who is 9 and who is just now really starting to read. Mm-hmm. I would read her a history lesson out loud, and then I'd say, okay, now it's your turn, draw a picture of what the story was about. And she would spend 15 minutes. She'd really get into it. She'd draw this whole picture, and then I'd say, okay, now tell me about your picture, and she would explain all what is happening in her drawing. And what was really exciting is not only was she telling me back what happened in the story, but in the drawing, she's able to give me some emotions, how she felt about the story. Like, she can communicate to me in a drawing, this is a good guy, and I really like that he did this, whereas I really don't like this guy, and her drawing will really make him look mean or, evil, because she was able to understand that that guy was not making good choices. And she could communicate that in a drawing where verbally or written, she didn't have the capability yet.
Right.
So that has been a huge thing. Is as far as the drawing. I could say a ton about that. I've been thinking about it, but I'll mention a couple of the other things too. As far as the writing, that is a tremendously helpful tool, because even if they only give you 1 or 2 sentences, they can say a lot as far as where they are at, understanding. Even on Shabbat, I often use this. I will say, okay, now tell me 3 ways we can keep this command, or draw me a picture of 3 ways we can keep this command. And their insights, as far as how they are understanding in their world at their age of how to keep a command in Torah, is pretty exciting to see, and it really gives you a window into their mind and into their soul and where they are at spiritually. And when you use that in their school and in Shabbat and when you're studying the Bible, it's a very good way to have that close relationship and understanding of where they are at, instead of just true and false questions or, reiterating facts. I want them to go beyond that. Yeah.
And they don't have to be a fantastic artist. Honestly,
No.
my kids are really good at art, and they don't really like to write, where I love to write, and I can draw stick figures. And sometimes I've been intimidated to actually give them a lot of artwork because I'm so bad at it. And I don't know why I do that, because that's dumb. But it's interesting how he uses our own talents and personalities to to incorporate the Torah into our lives. But in this week of conferences, we're going to be talking a lot about history and science and how to teach them with the Torah, and I know that's your specialty. But one of the things I really want to emphasize to people is that, first we get facts, but the point of facts is to be able to turn it around and communicate it to someone else. That's how we know we've matured. And anyway, I think you're doing a fantastic job, Heidi. I'm going to take a break to let everybody know that you have some products on your website. 2 of them I want to point out right now. You have some copywork books that are just things that are easy to print and give to your kids. But the ones I've really loved that go well with our stuff is the history and the Bible science, because you have provided so many of the discussion questions that go with it. So then you can get ideas of what to tell your kids. And I just thought they were tremendously helpful. So.
In fact, the science one was inspired by my 10-year-old who loves all things, animals, bugs, dinosaurs, all that kind of stuff. So that's all in there. Yeah. So. Yeah.
All right. I want to come back to the writing in just a minute, but before I do, I want to ask you as a mom a question. You have a chronic disease or disorder, or whatever we want to call it, with pain and stuff, and I also have some chronic health problems, and one of the things that I have struggled with is actually sending my kids outside, because I think I had it in my head that I had to go everywhere with them and kind of entertain them and think of things to talk about while we were out there, and I didn't feel well, so I just didn't do it. And I know you don't do that, but can you tell me a little bit more about what you do?
I actually, and perhaps I was a bit inspired by some older people in my life. My father-in-law particularly, he told me when they were kids, they would just go outside and lay on the ground and look at the clouds go by and find shapes, and they were free to just go out and explore and learn, and they weren't constantly going to this event or that event or having to do this or that. They were able to just learn and explore at their own pace. And my mother often just let us go play outside, and I'm like, you never were watching us. And she says, oh, yes, I was. You just didn't know it. But I find that when I just let my kids go out and play. Now, I didn't do it when they were little, but I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they're up there, and they've been taught the buddy system, so I feel safe letting them out there, okay? But then they come back and they're showing me a snake skin that they found and a bird's nest, and my 6-year-old is an expert, literally an expert on grasshoppers, and he can catch them and catch frogs, and he's showing them off. And I really feel because I just turned them loose, then they're coming back and showing me things, and they're so proud of their accomplishments, and I think they've learned some independence and ability to explore, and it has given them a chance to, I think, develop a relationship with their creator on their own terms. Mm-hmm. They don't need me always holding their hand. They're not always going to have me holding their hand, but they also know they can come running back and show me all their signs, and I'm going to be, amazed and astounded.
Exactly.
I'm not going to turn them away and say, "Ew, I don't want to see the frog." They know that they can come to me and show me all their cool things, and Mom's going to be excited and say, "Wow, yeah, really knew what he was doing when he made that frog camouflage so that the birds wouldn't get it," But I don't need to be necessarily walking around with them to do that, and I don't, because I just can't. Yeah, but I think it has worked out really well, because they've got that.
We've got customers that don't live in Michigan and they don't have the freedom that we have. Our laws are pretty easy. Some people have to do, 5 to 6 hours of school a day and document everything. Mm-hmm. But if I were that parent, I would just call that science. It's fantastic. You don't have to be in front of a textbook or, heaven forbid, just watching a video about it all the time. You're going to be out there observing it firsthand. What do you do in the winter?
They go outside in the winter too.
Sure.
They bundle up and head out, and they help us with firewood, and they're finding little things in the bark. Maybe too, being on a farm, and I was raised in the country. We're very hands-on. We do things together as a family, even if it's work. If the hay needs to be brought in, if the firewood needs chopped, we're all there. Even the 2-year-old, we're all doing it together. And yeah, we do watch science videos and various things. We do that too. We read stories, but I do just send them outside. And I know some people do not have that liberty, and I feel very bad for them. But but yeah, even in the winter, go outside. I
don't know about anybody else listening, but the thing that just keeps going through my head is, how does this compare to Torah? And this is so Torah. As you sit, as you rise, as you walk along, as you lie down. This is exactly how I think that Jehovah intended it for it to be for us, so that it wasn't a burden and it was easy.
And I believe it was Brad Scott who says it all comes back to a man, a woman, a house, and a piece of land. What better way to teach our children these Torah principles than to get them out on a piece of land? Because I firmly believe we see things in the physical world that teach us spiritual lessons, but if they're not actually experiencing those physical things, like the stars moving in the sky or the seasons changing, if they're not out experiencing those things or at least learning about them, then they don't completely understand a lot of things in Scripture. That's something that really impressed me when we first started learning Torah, is just how concrete it is. Sometimes now that I've been studying Torah for a while, I admit, I look in the New Testament, and sometimes it's hard because the verses are so abstract, and you've got to go back and define terms so much, whereas you go in, say, Psalms 1, and you've got a tree by the river, and it's so observable, and you can understand it because you can see it out your window. That's what I want my children to see. Yeah.
And as soon as you said that, my brain went right back to drawing. So as I was thinking of a tree, and I can't draw. I really can't. I can draw a little tree. So tell me more. I know you had things you wanted to tell me about drawing and writing and things that you're using that, with your kids.
Just something on the science, in fact. I've actually had my kids copy pictures out of field guides, and they loved it. It was like, when they were younger, that was like their science for a whole year. They would pick bugs or various things out of field guide and copy them and label them. I wanted to say just a couple things about the drawing, though, that if you are an observant parent, it can be very helpful. You can really understand your child's emotions from their drawings. My daughter, the one who's had some struggles with the reading, we strongly suspected that she has Asperger's.
Right.
And when we were first exploring this concept, I noticed that her drawings were very dark. She chose black and brown and she'd scribble over things. It was very dark. When we started giving her natural treatments and helping her, her pictures brightened up. The colors literally brightened up. They became more realistic. There were smiles on the people's faces again. If you're paying attention to your children and really watching for these details in their writing, in their drawing, in how they talk, you're going to be much more aware of how they are emotionally and spiritually. And I know it might seem like I'm not really paying attention to my kids, but I'm paying a lot of attention, even though, like my mom said, you didn't know I was watching you.
Absolutely.
But if you're paying attention to these details, it can really help you to help your children in areas that they're struggling. And that's just one example of that. And there may be anger issues that they're struggling with, where you're seeing, in their drawing that they're becoming a little violent or something. With her, I think she was feeling very isolated and alone and couldn't really communicate well, and so it came out in her drawings. So definitely something to pay attention to, because we want, as we're trying to teach our children Torah, if we don't have their hearts, if we don't have that close relationship with them, all we're doing is spouting off facts to them, and it's not going to mean anything. We've got to have that close relationship. We've got to be paying attention to these things. And
I don't know
when you're
about
homeschooling, it's all day.
It is, and you either get on each other's nerves or the relationships get closer, and sometimes there's a season of each. I have found that it has helped us as we're reading through the Torah. I wanted to mention too that you have a book called My First Torah, and I got that back. Let's see, about 2012 or 2013. Okay, somewhere in there. And and I would sit and read that with my kids, and I just you're going to laugh, but the thing that struck me is that you said we cover even the tricky passages in the Torah, even the touchy subjects. And I just remember laughing, going, "Oh no, I'm dreading those weeks," but actually it was fine. But I think the thing that is neat about going through the Torah with our kids year after year and having those discussions build on each other, you can remember where you were sitting last year when you did it and what you were talking about and some of the other discussions, and it kind of keeps building. And then you have this family, I don't know if I know the word for it, this common language, this common experiences and memories and jokes and funny things and even serious discussions that are, you have, in just your family, and it's very special. And in those hard times when your kids are struggling with things, you have all of that memory bank to draw things out of and to talk about, and it's quicker. It's right straight to the heart, and they feel like you care. But at least that's been our experience. But anyway.
Yes, and what's really exciting too is you'll come up to a Torah portion, you just get started, and they can reiterate the whole story, oh yeah, we know this. So, which is exciting. You see, which is why I'm a very, very strong proponent of going through the Torah portion every single year. The rabbis teach it takes a good 70 years to get a handle on it. Well, I've only been at it for 9, so we're going to keep at it. We're going to just keep every Shabbat going through those Torah portions, because you're not getting it all. It's every year we're building on it, and it takes a few years to understand what's in them, the concrete stuff. Now, okay, we're starting to apply and build on that, and you don't want to say, okay, well, we've done that. We're going to move on and do something else. You've got to stay there and keep going through, because that's the foundation of everything. So
I think about the future with that, and I have 7 kids. You have 7 kids, and if they get married, okay, then we have 14, and then they have children, and the numbers just start multiplying, and they go through the Torah every week with their families, and then their children go through it with their families, and we just how all of those memories that I was just talking about just bread. It just gives me goosebumps. I can't wait till
I know.
No.
That, and when we get to that point, Scripture talks way more about grandparents than parents, so, we're going to be pretty important then.
I know.
Yeah.
We'll have to have another phone call, okay? All right, you've just come out with a brand new book. It's called It's Okay to Hide in the Bathroom, and it's the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide to Enjoying Motherhood. I read it wrong. It is overwhelming many, many times. Can you just give us a little, in a nutshell, what was your heart in writing this book? And
I was, to be honest, I was sitting in the waiting room at the chiropractor's office, sitting next to a mom who was commenting on my little baby's cloth diapered butt because she used cloth diapers. And I said, well, how many do you have? Because here my kids practically fill the waiting room. And she says, oh, just the one, and that's it. I am totally done. And that just made me so sad because there are just, in fact, I'm getting kind of sad again right now. There are so many moms now who literally, they're just, one and I'm done. And I can't handle that one. And they've got no one coming alongside them and saying, it's a joy to have children. It's a joy to build a relationship with them and watch them grow and learn and develop. They've got no one to show them. And my heart in writing that book was to say, it is hard, yes, but it's enjoyable. It's fun. You can look at your children and it's pleasant. It's fun to be around them if you take the time to see it and make sure that when you get up every morning, you're like, I'm going to enjoy my kids today. Because, the scripture says children are a blessing, but a lot of moms just aren't seeing it anymore. So that's why I wrote that, was so people can start seeing, again, returning to this idea that having children is a joy and being a mom is a joy. Hard, but a joy. Yeah.
One of the things that made a difference for me, again, this came from learning the Torah. We were attending a congregation, and one week the elder that was teaching taught on the Aaronic blessing and how may Jehovah bless you and keep you and may his face shine on you. And he talked about how, when a little child runs into the room and a daddy's face lights up. And he was comparing that to how our Heavenly Father looks at us when we come to him. And the thought that crossed my mind was, I bet there are a lot of people that their faces don't light up when their kids run into the room. And it made a profound impact on me because as sometimes, we may not get any school done in a day because we're all just tired or there's just life happens and you just don't get to the to-do list, but you can at least make your face light up when the kids come into the room. It's something so simple. And
in fact, I think that's the first thing I say in the book, smile. You don't have to feel like smiling, just do it. And your body, your mind will follow. Sometimes I'm just like, but then I can give myself a little perspective and say, you know what, your son just said a really funny joke, why don't you laugh with him? It's okay, and lighten things up a bit. It doesn't have to be all the time. Just chill, Go outside, chill.
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone goes and visits your website. It is TorahFamilyLiving.com. I want to emphasize that the thing I love about Heidi's website is that anyone can afford to homeschool with her method. It doesn't matter how poor you are. She's just got such an amazing grasp on how to apply Torah to everyday life, and I think that's what our Father expects of us. He expects a life that is easy. His burden is easy, and I've messed that up. His yoke is easy, and his burden is light. But and I just hope that everyone will go and check out your articles, subscribe to your blog, and sign up for your email list. It's fantastic. And Heidi, is there anything you want to add before we close?
What you just said was very well said, actually. That's what I want people to see, is that it's a lifestyle, it's a journey. You're growing. You're not going to get it right every day, but you show up tomorrow, and you, as a family, you're doing it all together. And that's what I think Torah living is just growing and learning together as a family. And that's what I want to help people to do.